Derik Queen, Egor, Demin, and other big-name players are working out for the Pelicans. I'll tell you who they are and how it might reveal their draft night plans, plus Kevin Durant rumors. It's the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Friday, and we are going to be talking draft, trade rumors, and even draft rumors too. We got more Ace Bailey ones. But we got something to say about that, actually. That's going to be in the third segment of today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. But I want to get into some big-name players working out for the New Orleans Pelicans. Finally, we're starting to hear some about that. And it's going to give us some insight, I think, into the Pelicans draft night plans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Don't forget, starting on Monday, Locked On Pelicans along with Locked On LSU, Locked On Saints, and Locked On SEC is going to be on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, a 2-hour block from 10 to noon every single day on their channel 7.1 here in New Orleans, channel 7. And I think it's 9.3 in Baton Rouge. Locked On Pelicans will be on at 10:30 a.m. Monday through Friday. Look, if you got an office or something, throw the channel on. Let the Locked On shows play. That's a great way to support the channel. It's a really cool, first of its kind partnership like in the country, actually. So this is a very cool thing to be a part of here. More to come with that, and also some big draft night plans and everything that I'll reveal to y'all a little bit next week. So let's get into the draft workouts here. There are some big names. The Pelicans in years past, this stuff leaks out, but things have been a little bit quieter this year. That's to be expected with a regime change and new people coming in, less stuff just leaking out as relationships and those type of things are established. But Rafael Barlow of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast has given us a couple of big names for what appears to be a group workout, something agents don't particularly love, but the Pelicans are doing with big name players. Rafael Barlow, we're going to have him on the show today, but there's some technical difficulties with that like Google widespread outage that caused a problem with that. So he's going to be on the show next week. So he reported in the Locked On in the NBA Big Board Substack that he does that Maryland's Derik Queen, center, BYU's guard Egor, Demin, Georgia's power forward center Asa Newell, UConn's wing Liam McNeely, Illinois' wing Will Riley, and then Colorado State's wing Nick Clifford are all working out for the Pelicans. Those kind of represent the biggest names that we've heard about working out for the Pelicans in the pre-draft process so far. They've had a couple like interviews at the combine and things like that, but this is people coming to the facility, working out under the eyes of basically the Pelicans' new front office and getting that kind of information. This is a big step forward in the pre-draft process. But here's the thing. You know, what makes this intriguing is not that they're working out big name players. Even if it didn't get reported, that's a thing that they're doing, right? We know this. What makes this interesting, Derik Queen, Demin, Newell, Liam McNeely, Will Riley, Nick Clifford, is that's a pretty diverse range for guys coming in for a workout. The Pelicans just have the 7th overall pick. They don't have a pick in the 20s. They don't have a second round pick. And when you look at that group, really only Derik Queen and Egor, Demin are lottery, like feel good about lottery picks. And even then, it's really only Derik Queen. Demin could be 18, which isn't in the lottery, right? Asa Newell can be in that range too. He might be able to get into the lottery as well. So it presents a couple of questions, right? You know, if the Pelicans are looking at guys that kind of project, say, from 13 down, what are you doing when you have the 7th pick, right? You know, according to Rafael Barlow and his Locked On NBA Big Board, right? Demin and Queen are the only two that he has as lottery picks. Newell could get in there. He was invited to the green room. One of the first 13 invited. Another 12 will be invited, right? He has McNeely as a second rounder, and Will Riley and Nick Clifford project to land in the teens or early 20s. So none of these guys, other than Queen and maybe Demin, scream 7th overall pick, right? So it begs this question. Are the Pelicans just doing due diligence and scouting these guys, getting an up-close kind of personal look at them, for the future, for whatever it might be? And teams do that all the time. That is a very common thing. You work out guys that you know you won't be able to draft at all if they'll work out for you, because look, you keep that data, it goes in a binder, goes in a computer somewhere. And then if you trade for that player in the future, you have more data on them. You have NBA comps of who they could be, what you liked, what they, their responses to things. And that helps inform future decisions, of trades, free agent signings, all of that sort of stuff. That's really important information to have. And that's why you'll see teams work out a wide variety, a big range of where guys could be drafted. But also, is this the Pelicans maybe trying to either trade back and acquire 2 first-round picks, and they're doing their due diligence on guys they could take if that's the plan, or maybe trading back into the first round and keeping 7 and maybe trading other things to move back into the first round and get another guy, right? You look at Demin, he's a point guard. Derik Queen, Austin Newell are both bigs, and then you're looking at kind of 3 wings there a little bit. That's a spread range of guys, too, that maybe they have someone they're targeting at 7. They draft that guy, and if you want to trade back in, you have done your due diligence on some other guys that you could get that aren't guards, right? It's 3 wings, 2 bigs, and 1 guard there. It's intriguing that these are kind of the first names that we've heard really leaked out during this process. It raises more questions than answers. And again, there might not actually be real questions here, at least to the Pelicans. This simply might be them doing their due diligence and working out every single player that they absolutely can, because you do that sort of thing. That's good front office work by an NBA team to be doing that, not just for this draft again, but for the future as well. So in a weird way, working out all these people might not be anything other than the Pelicans front office doing their jobs. And that's what we want to hear that they're doing. There were questions about the Joe Dumars hire, about the end of his tenure in Detroit. Will Weaver has some questions around him too because of his Detroit tenure. So while we're not going to get answers to those questions we have about the hires for a while, you just want to know they're doing their job. And now I don't ever doubt, I never really doubted that they were going to do their job, but hey, here you definitely know that they are. It goes back to, the report that there are no untouchables on the Pelicans roster. Good. That's a front office doing their job, and I love to hear it. So despite these names not being maybe the sexiest names that we could look at with the 7th overall pick, and you're looking at, they're going to trade down. There's also going to be conversations, workouts that don't get reported. And this is just kind of the start of everything. And, one piece of information and we have an incomplete picture. But it does shed some interesting information and raises some questions, and we'll see. But it's interesting on how it could impact draft night, I think. And those are the biggest names so far. Will Guillory had a couple other ones that the team has worked out, but no one anywhere close to this sort of group. So coming up next, we get some Kevin Durant news, and it does impact the Pelicans in an indirect way. Let's break that down. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Olipop. Look, I'm actually excited about this because I've been drinking these all week. Olipop is a new kind of soda made for people who love the classic taste of soda but want something that supports their health. With just 2 to 5 grams of sugar, 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in every can, Olipop is reimagining soda in a way that's better for your gut. Like traditional sodas loaded with sugar, 39 grams in a regular Coke, 44 grams in orange Fanta. Olipop flips the script with just a fraction of the sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and gut-friendly ingredients like OlliSmart, a blend shown to support digestive and overall health. And it's a soda that tastes like the real thing, but actually does something good for you. I got a can right here. They sent a bunch, and they're absolutely incredible. This is the root beer flavor. It tastes like real root beer, except it's not bad for you. So if you have those cravings for soda, but you're trying to be healthier, I really cut down on sugar the past couple of years. Olipop's a really great way to kind of get the same taste, the same flavors, those cravings you have, but something that's good for your body. So you've got to give them a try. I really like the root beer. I like the vintage cola flavor, a lot of little caramely, some vanilla, some cinnamon in that one as well. It's really great, and you're drinking a soda, but it's good for you here. So get a free can of Olipop. Just buy any 2 cans in store and they're going to reimburse you for one. Head to drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA to claim your free can and find Olipop near you. That's drinkolipop.com/LockedOnNBA. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network Monday through Friday at 10:30 a.m. For your second listen, check out Locked On NBA Big Board. NBA draft expert Raphael Barlow, who will be on the show next week, reacts to every workout interview and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Especially he's given us great reports on like who the Pelicans are working out and all of those sorts of things. So let's get into, we're going to switch from draft coverage right here to draft night or the night before the draft, let's say. Kevin Durant is expected to be traded by the Phoenix Suns on draft night or right before draft night. Basically in the next 2 weeks or so is what we're looking at here. Less than 2 weeks, because that's the draft is like 10 days away or something like that now. Kevin Durant is likely going to be the first domino to fall this offseason, and this is a good thing if you're New Orleans. Look, the Pelicans are not in the running for Kevin Durant. Not going to happen. The teams that we've seen interested in him feel like closer to title contenders, and probably teams he's much more interested in joining. Houston, Miami, even though Miami's not particularly close, but it's Miami, right? We've heard that the Minnesota Timberwolves are interested in him as well. The San Antonio Spurs seem to be building something that, because of Victor Wembanyama, players want to join in on that. All of those things are seemingly big draws for a guy like Kevin Durant. Only one team can get him, and that's going to hold up the market as every team is, probably in that group angling for Kevin Durant, but, not making other moves, because if you get him, you need to have the assets, you need the cap space, all of that kind of stuff around it. So it holds the market up. It holds everything up. And since the Pelicans aren't in the running for Kevin Durant, they're going to be in the running for other things that are held up by that first domino that you're waiting to fall. But now that we have an idea that this domino is going to fall sooner rather than later, that speeds everything up. And that's only a good thing if you're like an impatient kind of person. So this is what we want to hear. We didn't want to see a deal get done, in the opening hours of free agency or even in the middle of like the free agency period, a week or two after, because that slows things down. It's going to kind of paralyze decision making, and no one's going to trade the players that you want to kind of get on this team if the Pelicans are even going to do anything like that. So this is important, in my opinion, that a Kevin Durant deal gets done. That'll immediately then segue into what about Giannis and Milwaukee? Now, I don't think he's going to get moved, and teams that miss out on Kevin Durant are going to go after Giannis, or try even harder for Giannis, and maybe that drives his price up a little bit. They're going to say no, and then everyone can kind of move on, and it can be business as usual, and where people know where they stand. Teams that miss out on a Kevin Durant, on a Giannis, or some of the other big name players that are out there, does that all of a sudden make someone like Zion Williamson interesting, especially as a buy low candidate? Now, I don't think Zion's going to get moved. Joe Dumars has basically said we're not moving Zion Williamson, but overall, it at least starts to kind of drive up the price for other people. In years past, this has like really held things up. But because of the way the second apron is working in this collective bargaining agreement, we have a show on Locked On Pelicans for the everydayers. You've already heard this, but if you haven't heard it before, go listen to that show. If you don't know what a second apron is or a first apron and why they're so restrictive, go listen to that show, because that collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, really informs how everything works around the league. So it is important to kind of understand that if you want to know why certain moves are made or not made in the first place when it comes to it. But the league new year starts on July 1. Money kind of switches and all of that. Players officially become free agents, etc. And, teams that maybe have players whose extensions are kicking in, right? The Pelicans are in a certain spot right now, are in a different spot on July 1 with Trey Murphy's salary jumping to $25 million. That can really impact your books and frankly be restrictive to certain teams. But if you get this deal done on draft night under the current league new year, with the draft being on June 25th, you don't run into that problem. And so I think you're going to see during this draft a flurry of moves. I would imagine the Kevin Durant trade is finalized before that, day or two before, maybe even a week before. But certainly it's going to get done before that so that, his income, the new team has a way to plan and pivot and know what they need to do. The Suns then know exactly what their situation is. And then that's going to inform other moves on draft night. And we've heard that from talking to people around the league, it's going to be a pretty active draft night. You have multiple teams trying to consolidate picks in the Oklahoma City Thunder, in the Orlando Magic, the Brooklyn Nets especially. There's going to be deals to be made and value to be had, whether that's trading back down, trading back into the first round. And we'll talk a little bit more about draft rumors and Ace Bailey in the next segment here. But, normally you don't see draft night go bonkers and be crazy. It feels like it's going to be nuts on the 25th, that Wednesday night, which is why we're planning some special stuff for you here on Locked On Pelicans. I will be at the team facility for their media availability and some other things. And we'll do a live show on draft night as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun, because I think we're going to have a lot to talk about just around the league in general as we try and kind of piece things together and figure out exactly what's going on all around the league. But that Kevin Durant domino, if you don't think Giannis is being traded, is the first big thing, and nothing gets done until that happens. So the fact that everyone is like, yeah, we're going to get this done pretty soon and we're going to wrap this up, means it should be an explosive night. If Kevin Durant wasn't traded before or on draft night, it might be a quieter draft night. You might see some picks exchange hands and that kind of stuff, but this is the type of night now that really could get kind of nuts and reshape the league and be very, very active. Thinking about it, I didn't put this together in the last segment, and I really should have. Thinking about it with, the Pelicans looking at some of these end of first round guys that could slip to the second round. You can buy a pick. They can send out cash in a deal this year, and then, when the league new year rolls over, you get to send out cash again. So it's a way to kind of double dip in a sense if you wanted to. Pelicans could just straight up buy a second round pick, and I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if they ended up doing something like that. Although, did they trade cash considerations for the second round pick that became Antonio Reeves? I can't remember that off the top of my head. Let's see if we can find that out, and I'll do this in real time here. Where is Antonio Reeves and how he came to the team? Because that wasn't their own pick. It was, let's see. No, there was no cash included in that deal. So they potentially could send out cash considerations to acquire another pick, which might not be the worst idea for the team to go and do if you want to add some depth, some value to this franchise here. So I'm interested in that idea, that maybe that's some of the research they're doing with some of these guys as well. We'll see. It depends on what's going to happen on draft night. So coming up next, let's get into more Ace Bailey trade rumors and let's shoot some things down. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA Finals are here. You've got the Indiana Pacers up 2-1. Kind of surprising here in what was a fun game 3. So whether you want to get in on the individual game spreads, the Oklahoma City Thunder are favored by 5 for game 4, even on the road. Think about that one for a second. Indiana has played very, very well and seemed to figure out Shai Gilgeous-Alexander a little bit. Do you want to take the points? Do you want to give up the points there, or just bet on the Pacers outright on the money line and get some really good odds? No matter what, FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. So with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Something that I found interesting, despite being down 1-2 in the series, 2-1 in the series, the Oklahoma City Thunder are still favored. You can get really good odds on the Indiana Pacers to win the series, and you're essentially got a game in hand. It's kind of an intriguing bet to really consider there. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. For your second listen, it's got to be Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson of the Locked On Saints podcast, making sense of everything black and gold. We got some updates on their travel schedule. And guess what? Ross is going to be out there in California with them for a while. He's already booked. Boots on the ground, covering everything you want to know about the black and gold over at the Locked On Saints podcast. Make them your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's get into the latest batch of Ace Bailey rumors, because this is the thing that won't really die. And we talked about this the past couple of days too. Ace Bailey is a divisive prospect, like not in the sense of like he's good or bad, right? He's going in the top 10. He won't go past 7 to the Pelicans is what I've been told, that if he's there at 7 and the Pelicans have the 7th pick, they will take him. Feel very confident in that. But the newest one comes from Kevin O'Connor over at Yahoo, and in his latest mock draft, he has a trade out there that is the Pelicans trading up to number 3, giving up the 7th pick, next year's Indiana pick, which won't be great, but it's still a first-round pick that's going to be in the 20s. It's not the worst thing. And Herb Jones. So 7, Herb Jones, and next year's Indiana pick to move up 4 spots to the 3rd pick to draft Ace Bailey. I'm not buying this. Look, I draft Ace Bailey if he's there at 7. Without question, I would be running up to draft Ace Bailey. I'd probably draft him over Jeremiah Fears, truthfully, at 7. If Fears and him were on the board, that won't be the case. But I would take Ace Bailey. I think his ceiling can be that high. But I am not giving up Herb Jones and a future draft asset to go get Ace Bailey. If he falls to you, that's a value pick. You do it. Other than that, I have absolutely no desire whatsoever to trade up for Ace Bailey. This screams Daryl Morey and the Philadelphia 76ers trying to drum up interest in a pick that they feel is putting them in a little bit of an awkward spot. And Fletcher Mackel, friend of the show, said, I'm told from an NBA source that rumors and speculation of Herb Jones being traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, part of Nola moving up to number 3 in the draft, are, quote, BS, end quote. And that talk is probably coming from the Sixers, who are trying to up the price for the 3rd overall pick. That's my read on it. Right after that, you had some of this being like, well, they're trying to trade up for number 2, actually, the 76ers, not the Pelicans. So I think Philly just doesn't want to have to kind of make this choice where the obvious pick would be Ace Bailey at 3, but they don't particularly love Ace Bailey, or at least Ace Bailey at 3, and they don't want to do it. So that's where this is kind of coming from here. So yeah, right? Like this is, it's smokescreen season and all of that, to use a quote from Lee Anderson, right? Zion's stepdad, was it like, believe half of everything you read and like nothing of what you, I forget what the quote was, a couple of years ago regarding Zion and some of the off-court stuff, but something like that. This is one that, I'm not really buying it. Again, I think they would take him at 7, and that's what you should do. But I do not see this team trading up for Ace Bailey, let alone giving up Herb Jones in that deal. One of the things, and we'll talk about this as we get closer to the season, right? Once we get past free agency, once we get past the draft, I'm not planning on dropping to 3 days a week this offseason, so we'll stay 5 days a week. So a lot of Locked On Pelicans coming for you. I've done some deep dives on the defense, watching some of the film and like what really went wrong last year for them. And obviously a big part of that was you were missing Herb Jones, right? Like how much did that hurt the team last year? A pretty incredible amount, right? Look, y'all know this. You could be saying this here on Locked On Pelicans. It's not like I'm brilliant for saying Herb Jones playing more games is going to help your defense. And you really saw it fall off a cliff this past year. Herb Jones only playing 20 games is a big part of that. That's just the type of guy you want to keep, the type of guy that you really like, let alone whose contract is really good right now. And he's extension eligible. They can re-sign him or extend his contract. And in fact, they should look at doing that, especially for the right price. I just don't see them giving up Herb Jones. He's also a fan favorite player. I bought a new jersey last year. I wanted one of those Purple City Edition jerseys. Herb Jones with a new number. That was like the easiest choice that I had to make. So I got myself a new Herb Jones jersey that I wore basically all during Mardi Gras because it was warm. I think fans would be upset if you let Herb Jones go. Now, you can't do everything with only fans in mind. You've got to do what you think is in the best interest of the team, and they will certainly do that. But there's not very many worlds where giving up Herb Jones is a good thing, let alone for an unproven rookie that people have some questions about with his shot profile and some of the other things that he does, hustle and things like that, at least on defense. There's big questions there. I don't see that happening. But we'll probably get a new batch of rumors on Monday and we'll talk about them then. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I appreciate y'all so much for listening. We'll be back on Monday, hopefully with Rafael Barlow of Locked On NBA Big Board. A lot to talk about leading up to the draft, a lot going on, and I'll see y'all next time.